You are listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Hey folks, happy Monday evening. This is Scotty Roberts. Yes, it was a long weekend, and I'm still recovering from it. Those of you watching on the video stream can look at my face. I woke up and I looked Asian this morning. My puffy eyes and my puffy face, and it has not abated all day. So I'm going to tell you all about the weekend and what went on. No, it was not a drunken binge, which is now a thing of my long past misbegotten youth. And frankly, if it had been a drunken binge, I could do it just like I did it when I was 25, but you know what? It just hurts more. So let me tell you about that. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey radio network, and that is ODYSY1.com. That's where you can listen to the nationally broadcast radio audio stream of this program. And you can go over to their site, ODYSY1.com, to see all the places that this show broadcasts, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, different podcast sites, and so on. All different kinds of online networks that pick this show up, as well as nationally broadcast on various terrestrial stations across the nation, and it's also picked up internationally. How about that? Have a large audience in Australia, in Great Britain, England, as those of us less refined might call it, Europe, and Canada, and other places. So you can listen to the audio stream there, or come on over to the live video simulcast of this program every Monday through Friday at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, and join the live chat room during the radio program. And that's over at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Now, as you'll have to pardon me, we had a repeat show that played on Friday because my day just got incredibly convoluted, and I was unable to do even a recorded broadcast for this show because we had several things going last Thursday through Saturday night. As you know, Rocky Stucci and I of the Rocky Stucci Situation Room over on Mojo 50 Radio and Odyssey One Radio, we had a live remote at the Depot Bar and Grill in Hastings, Minnesota. That was on Thursday evening, and that ran quite late. And then Friday and Saturday, Rocky and I were part of a traditional event that we do every year at this time of year. It was the Phantom's Feast at the Trail of Terror at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival site, where Rocky and I come in every year and do a little ghost hunt of some of the old buildings and the old sites at this old site of the Minnesota Renaissance Festival. And it is quite an intriguing place when you are there without all the colorful banners streaming, and the actors and the singers and the street entertainment, all filtering around 20,000 people a day. When it's quiet and it's dark and it's empty, you see the site for what it is. It's an old oak grove on 23 acres of land that over the last 50 years has had this old Renaissance-era village built into it. And it is an amazing place. And there are several, and you can imagine over the years, with all the entertainers and their various spiritual points of view and their practices, mixed into all the energy of all the people that have crossed through that place in 50 years. And you get the idea of what is out there. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures tonight. Sorry on the radio broadcast that you're not going to have the opportunity to see these, but I'll describe them to you. And if you want to see them, you can come over to the video stream at YouTube, and you can take a look at them there, or find them there later in the archived sites under the section on the YouTube page, Mr. Scotty Roberts, entitled Intrepid Radio Program. And so why don't we start right now, and I'll show you a couple of these things, and I'm going to talk about some paranormal stuff, but I also really want to talk with you about what Rocky and I did earlier in the day on Saturday, along with our dear friend, and you've heard her on Rocky's show and my show, Paranormal Sarah Soderlund, who is a psychic medium friend of ours. And also what makes her very intriguing is that she is also very scienced up, if you will. She has her PhD in forensic psychology, and that's what she does for a living. She works for a bit for the prison system, for the state, and she evaluates, let's put it this way easily, she could evaluate a mass murderer for the state. And this is the kind of thing that she does. And so she is a little bit of both. She's got both feet in two different worlds. So she was along with us as well. She came with us out to the Renaissance Festival, and she was with us at a place where we stopped rather impromptu, because Rocky and I had said we were going to do this for the longest time. And that is the Fort Snelling site. I don't know why I went blank on that for a second. Fort Snelling here on the border of St. Paul and Minneapolis. It's really situated right next to the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. And on one side, on the west, and on the east, it's bordered by all the wetlands of the Mississippi River. And so it's an intriguing site because, as you remember with the series I did on the ghost dance and the Dakota and the conquering of the American West in the 1800s, there was a concentration camp at the base of Fort Snelling, down below the hill and the cliffs that overlook the river. Down on the river flats, they had cleared the woods out there, and they had a concentration camp set up for the Dakota people right after the Dakota Wars in Minnesota. And there were, out of the, I believe, 1,200 some people from the Dakota tribe that were interred at this concentration camp, over 300 of them died in the winter of 1862 to the cold, the elements, deprivation, starvation. And this site is not marked in any way by the state of Minnesota. It's mentioned on some placards that there was a concentration camp here, and I think that was due to pressure from the native peoples here. And there is one memorial that is built out of timbers that stands near the site, or at the edge of the site of this concentration camp that was down on the river flats. And other than that, there's not much there. And you can walk down, there's beautiful walking and biking paths down there, through there now. They go over to Pike's Island, which is just the Mississippi River cuts through, and then there's a channel that cuts around, and there's an island there. And you can cross over on the footbridge and see the island. This is the place where they believed, the native peoples believed, was the creation of life. Took place on what is now Pike's Island. And it's all filled with walking paths, dirt paths that are kept in very good shape, and some tarmacked paths, that asphalted paths. And so you can go visit this place and walk through and never know what you're walking through and what happened there. And we don't have a lot of evidence to show you other than anecdotal, word of mouth, what happened to us there on Saturday, just a few days ago. But I want to tell you a bit about that. And let me show you. I do not have a picture of this up right now. Let's see if I can bring one in. And I don't have it prepared already. So we're going to call this the concentration camp. Pardon me while I'm doing a little bit of technical stuff here in the background as we talk. Let's see if I can find this for you. It is, I'm going to call it Pikes Island, and it may or may not be accessible right here on my, I'm going to type concentration camp and try to find this for you. But this is the place. I want you to get a picture of this if you don't remember it from when we did this once before. And let's see, it's spinning and ticking its own good time to try to find this for us. And let me see if I've got it here. And if not, I will... no, I don't see it coming up. So my apologies for not preparing that ahead of time. I'll see if I can find that during the break and put that up for the second segment. But this place is, you go walking through there on the bike paths nowadays, and most people who just come there to use the bike paths enjoy the nature down there. They don't see a lot of... they don't see anything about the history of the place other than to know that Fort Snelling sits on the bluff up above them, and that this was all now the historic Fort Snelling State Park. And so it's just a fun place to be. There's a picnic area. There's an interpretive center down right across from the Dakota Monument, which was not erected, by the way, officially by the state, but was erected by private donors from within the Dakota tribe and outside donors that put that up on the site. And the fight they had to go through to get that done was amazing. We were supposed to film there about 11 years ago at Fort Snelling. We had one of the local major affiliates, the ABC affiliate up here, was going to come and join us as we filmed that site, going through doing a documentary on the history of the place and also a bit of paranormal investigation to see if we could possibly, as we said it, to see if we could communicate with the voices of anybody who had been there, anybody who was still there. And the day before we were going to film, the Minnesota Historical Society pulled the plug on us. And it said they don't want us stirring up the emotions, the passions, the opposition of the Dakota tribe, because they already have enough trouble with them as it is already, quote unquote. So we didn't end up filming there. We ended up going somewhere else at the last minute and doing some things. But we were finally in there this Saturday, and as you know from some of my posts on my social media, as well as things I talked about when I was doing the series on Native America, that this place is that I had visited there once with my wife and family earlier in the season, and we walked through, and it was highly emotive, but I did not do any kind of investigation. We wanted to treat anything like this with utter respect, humility, not just thrill-seeking this site, as a lot of ghost hunting really involves. You go out there and you say you're being respectful and that you're doing it to get answers, and it's still, there is a thrill factor in it when you hear something speak to you from out of nowhere, or you catch something on film, or you experience something. So Rocky and I had intended to do this long before, and we had lots of conflicts in our schedules and couldn't do it. So we, on the way out to the Minnesota Renaissance Festival, we started out a few hours ahead of time and thought we would go stop by, Rocky, Sarah, and I, at the site of the concentration camp down below Fort Snelling. And so we were there Saturday late afternoon, and it's beautiful down there, first of all. Beautiful for hiking, beautiful for photography and things like that. But unless you know what happened right beneath your feet, you would never know that atrocity took place there. And so we set up just a spirit box, which we used to, and I demonstrated that a little bit on this show last week, how that works. It picks up disembodied voices, and it answers. Some of the skeptics will say, well, that's radio gibberish. What they fail to recognize during the skepticism is the voices that float over the revolving frequencies and the voices that seem to be answering in response to you, which makes it live. It's interactive. It's not just looped energy. It's not just something that's made up. It's not somebody hoaxing and broadcasting in, because on the device, it scans the frequencies the way we use it, 8 frequencies per second. And you try to get a word or a phrase in when you've only got 1/8 of a second to do it, and you will see how involved and detailed some of the voices we get actually are. Now, we had filmed this when we were there, and for some reason it just would not. We were doing a live stream, and we had to cancel the live stream because it kept chopping up and falling apart. And as we cancel that, it of course erases the video. So we have no video or recordings of what happened there that day. And I'll talk with Rocky about this later tonight, and we'll give you some more information over on the Situation Room. But I'm going to tell you right now that what we picked up there was very moving. And I'm going to give you some examples of what we heard and what we picked up. And we were in the woods, and we'd walk into the woods off of the beaten path. And there were some people that were riding their bikes by and walking their dogs, and we're out in the woods, and we've got this little device that makes the sound, and try to keep it a little low so it didn't carry too far. And we asked very respectfully if there was anyone on that site that would like to communicate with us. Will you talk to us, we asked. Will you share with us anything you'd like to say? And we specifically asked for any of the Native American peoples who were interred at the concentration camp there below the fort, and that were standing on this site, on this solemn ground, which has been, of course, turned into a state park. And would anybody here, we asked, like to share with us, communicate with us? And as we're listening, almost from the get-go, from turning the on switch on, we heard all kinds of voices. Many of them, it's unintelligible. We didn't know if we were hearing it in other languages or if it was just hard to understand. Sometimes even the clearest voices that come through are a little hard to understand, but sometimes you get utter clarity. And I know with Sarah there, who is psychic medium, she was picking up on some of the emotion and the feeling, and she was calling out words as we were hearing them. And you could hear layer upon layer upon layer of voices coming through. And we could hear, and some of them were very loud in the foreground, others were very diminished. You could hear them in the background, running beneath other voices. And we heard everything from the singing of small children to, and these are very clipped, very short, 1, 2, and 3 seconds long, to women's voices, men's voices, very dark, deep, heavy voices, gravelly voices, all throughout the whole time we were there. And there was one point that was very poignant for all of us. And we're standing in the midst of the woods, and you can see most of the trees around us are not old growth, but the bigger trees, you could gauge them at about 100 to 150 years. Now remember, this site had been cleared of timber for the concentration camp, so there were a lot of younger trees. There were a few very old growth trees around what we had marked as the perimeter of this concentration camp. And some of them, there had to be one there that was at least 300 to 400 years old, with, if you had cut through the trunk would have had a diameter of maybe 6 to 7 feet, but all the way around the circumference of that, you're looking at 15 to 20 feet around the tree. And they're very tall, some of them dead, very tall oak trees. And around the base of these trees, around the roots, we were finding stones, like the stone that they had built the fort out of. And there was very soft ground there as well. And there was one big tree that was like a twin tree that grew up. Very old growth, couple of 100 years old, by guesstimation. And right in the crux of that was a stone that was standing. And then around the base of the tree, Sarah found more stones. And we kept walking around and finding lines of stones. And we thought, was this part of grave markings? Was it part of border markings? Perhaps a small border wall or a marking for the border of the concentration camp. They built berms up in a big square around this concentration camp with the log walls all the way around it, like a fort. And so was it part of these ramps, these, what do you call them? You know what I mean. It's just the mounds that are running through. And they're still there. They're covered with grass and trees, and you could find them. I think it would be an amazing site for archaeology to respectfully find what's there and find the layout of this camp. So, having said that, here we are in the midst of all of this. And on the Spirit Box, we're asking one very poignant question as the time went on. And Sarah said it first, and then Rocky and I repeated it. Is there anything you would like us to know? Is there anything you would like us to share with people? What do you have to say to us to bring to other people? And almost immediately, and by almost I only mean within a second or two, was a deep, gravelly male voice that called out, "Remember us," as clear as day. And I wish we'd have had some recording devices. Maybe it's good that we didn't. But there we were, and our experience, all three of us, was standing there. Sarah was the first to shout out. He said, "Remember us." Because Rocky and I looked at each other, and then we heard Sarah say, he said, "Remember us, remember us." And that's definitely what we heard. And so this is part and parcel my shows I did that involved talking about this and the conquering of the Native American West by the United States, the atrocities that were committed at that time. The message we got the loudest and the clearest out of children shouting and singing, women calling out, some Dakota language that was being used, all kinds of voices upon voices on top of voices on top of other voices. The strongest message we heard on Saturday afternoon when asked, "What can we do for you? What can we share? What do you have to tell people?" were the two words, "Remember us." And so, in part, that's why we went there. And I want to go back there again and do some more recording so we have things that we might be able to share with you. But for now, let it stand that this experience at Fort Snelling and the old site of the overgrown concentration camp, which is not marked, it's only mentioned in a few words on placards and posters and things like that. And there's a memorial there erected by the Dakota themselves that we are to remember them and remember what happened there. And at that, I've got to go out to break. It's the end of the first half. Sit tight for 2 minutes, and I'll be right back. All right, welcome back after that break. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on Odyssey Radio Network. That's Odyssey 1, ODYSY1.com. And you can listen in, come and watch the video simulcast of this over on my YouTube stream. And that is youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts, Mr. all spelled out. You can join the live chat room that is there with other Intrepid listeners and just share your views, listen there, communicate with everybody else, have a good time. All right, thanks for being here, folks. Let's continue on where we were. I'm going to throw up a picture right now that I didn't have before the break, and I want you to see this. This, just as a reminder, this is the concentration camp that is on the river flats down below Fort Snelling. This photo was taken in 1862, and you can see one of the buildings of the fort is still standing there. I don't believe that building still exists today, unless that's one of the barrack buildings. We couldn't quite pinpoint exactly what spot this photo was taken from, what vantage point. But this is all down below the fort on the river flats, and you can see where they have cleared out the trees. We can see the river in the back. That's just you can see the river in the back and the river much further in the back. This is Pike's Island you're seeing out there across the river. This is just a channel of the river that divides off the island from the mainland. And then the Mississippi River is out beyond. And so there's a little footbridge there today that you can cross to get over to Pike's Island. This is the concentration camp. There are now big roads and paths going all through here, and it's all wooded over. And this is the approximate location where we were standing in the woods and got some of the voices that we got. The voice that said, "Remember us." Now, also, while we were there, that's enough of that. I'm going to take that down so you can see that's an actual photo of the camp that existed there. And there was something that happened that was, you can say this is just a natural occurrence. You can say that there's nothing supernatural about this at all. And you might be right. But it's always, with everything we say when we're doing paranormal investigation, it's timing. It's what appears to be coincidence. It's the things that happen almost on command or as a result of what you're doing. We were standing there after asking all these questions. We turned off the spirit box, and we thanked them. We said, "Thank you for speaking to us." And in all of this, asking for anything you want to leave us with, that you want to show us. And as we're standing there walking out of the woods and we came to the road, we looked back, and there was, Sarah said, "Look over there." And there was a deer standing almost on the site where we had been standing. And we hadn't seen all the times I'd been there. Now, there are deer that live there, obviously. There are woods, and there's the wetlands down below with all the forested land down there, as close to the city as this is. So they do live there. But we hadn't seen one, and there's people all over all the time, so they've obviously become accustomed to the people. And there was a deer standing right almost on the site where we had been. And so we took some pictures of it, and we said, "Thank you." What's your opinion, guys? Was that a sign to us from the native peoples? I don't know. It seemed to coincide coincidentally and align with what we were asking. So it was very moving. And later we saw the same deer out on the path, in between all the people, just walking down the path and off into the woods. So there was that as well. And by the way, for those of you on the radio that were not able to see the image I just put up, I did not describe it very well, other than to state things. But it was an old, I don't know if it was a tintype or a glass print. It was an old photograph from the 1860s. and it showed looking down from up on the hill of the fort, and you could see a corner of one of the fort buildings down in the lower left to center of the picture, and way down on the bottom of the river flats you could see a big squared out area with mounds around it and the fence post walls going all the way around, and at least 100 teepees set in the middle of that. That was the concentration camp where all the Native American peoples lived, and many died over the winter of 1862. So you can go see that over on the YouTube channel in the rebroadcast of this, if you want the archive, of this show, or you can just go to Google, type in Fort Snelling, Snelling, Fort Snelling concentration camp, and you're going to see the photos of that. And I've got a few more photos to show you because I was going to start talking about some things in a little more general terms about capturing things on film, seeing things, and I want you to see something here. We went from the Fort Snelling site over to the Renaissance Festival grounds. I'm going to take a picture and throw it up here for you. Let's see if I can turn it on. There it is. That's a little closer up than the one I wanted to show you. But this is the Minnesota Renaissance Festival grounds. That is the building they refer to as the Pavilion. And this is where down below, it's all open air. It's all open air up top. You just see this during festival time, so there's some colorful banners hung there. But this is where we get some activity. And there is an old story here that it says, as the festival, as you know, you think of all the different weird types that are drawn to doing artsy festivals like this one. Think of the all the young pagans, acorn shakers of the week, people who want to try their hand at magic and don't really know what they're doing. There were some people many years ago out at the fest, some young kids, who raised the spirit of something. I got to sneeze, folks. Sorry, I have no cough button, as you know. I repeat that every time I do something like that. Sorry, just hit me out of nowhere. How's that for scintillating radio? So these kids raised something, and it was pretty dark. And it was not a ghost. It was some kind of entity, some kind of elemental. And they could not shut it down or put it back, so to speak. And as much as they tried. And so they came to get the advice and help from very seasoned pagan people that were part of the festival. And those people were not able to shut it down either, but they were able to chase it up onto the site and entrap it. And they entrapped it on, as the story goes, on the upper floor of the pavilion. And what's interesting about this is that I know some of the people who were part of this. So this isn't just a festy urban legend. This is something that took place. And you can believe whatever you want about what was happening. The fact that it did happen is not in question. And what the claims are is not in question. Now, it's interesting. There was one night that one of the security guards for the site was walking around the site, and he saw somebody up on the second floor. And he called up. He says, "Hey, you are not supposed to be up there. Come on down." And because it's considered not safe at night, there's no lights up in there. It's got a railing around the second floor. It's open air. And it's like, you're really not supposed to be in there, so come on down. And nobody answered. So he went to the doorway that had a little tower with a ladder that goes up to the second floor. And he climbed up there, and there was nobody there. And mind you, if somebody had wanted to come out of there, they would have had to come down the same ladder. And so nobody had come down. And as he's standing there, he said he felt what felt like somebody rushing him and went right through him. And as the story goes, he happened to have a little glass bottle of patchouli in the pouch on his belt, as all good festies do. They have a bottle of patchouli. And as this thing rushed through him, it broke the bottle of patchouli all over, and it shattered the bottle. And so you can do what you want with that, but this is an entity that is supposed to still be there. And according to Jimmy Cunningham, who runs the show that we were doing this weekend, he had checked with some people, and they said, yes, so far as they all know, that entity is still up there. What it is, who it is, why it is, nobody knows for sure. But that it's still up there. There should have been no way for that to have broken the bonds. And they came in, I think, recently to check it out and said the thing is still there. Now, what's interesting is last weekend, a week ago, I was out at the site without Rocky or Sarah and led the little ghost investigation for the people that had come to the show. And the spirit box wasn't working correctly, and we were talking about this very story right in the midst of it. As I'm talking on the spirit box, trying to get some response, we heard a big thump, thump, thump upstairs. And everybody heard that, so something banged around upstairs. Now, mind you, there's nothing up there. Nothing. It's an empty, open deck is what it is. So we said, well, maybe the wind blew a branch off of one of the trees or something like that. Now, we had never heard it before doing this, just last weekend. Now, this past weekend, just 3 days ago, we were there on the same site, and right at the very beginning, as we started asking on the spirit box, we heard a crack, thump, 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 thump upstairs again, twice now, in a week's time, when we've never heard anything there in 6 years of doing a ghost investigation there. We heard something. And now, I ask you, coincidence? There was a branch laying on the ground. Was it that branch that blew off and hit the decking up there and bounced off and down onto the ground? It's possible. It's about 6 feet, big twiggy branch off of an oak tree. It's possible that that's all it was. But here's where you need to ask the question again. Coincidence? Timing? It happened right as we were asking for some kind of response from upstairs. And that's what happened. Now, do ghosts use things like a branch falling off and hitting? Or is that just an excuse, a way that we use to describe a strange happening? So, needless to say, it happened. It happened 2 weekends in a row where we heard something up there. And we got lots of voices and lots of weird things, but nothing concise, nothing that we could say, aha, there's our aha moment. But we did get a lot of voices. There was something else that happened out at the festival this weekend. And again, these are not recorded. I'm not sure if this one made it to a live stream or not. We were out at the old bakery stage, which is the oldest stage on the site. And it's about 50 years old. And we've gotten a lot of response over there. And Friday night, the first night, we tried something. And Sarah was there. And Sarah's very animated when she talks to things. We had a crowd of about 40 people, I think, around us. Which is very hard to do any kind of investigation work. And what it was really supposed to do was show people how we do what we do. And if you get something along the way, that's great. And as Sarah was talking, she got a lot of voices. We all got a lot of voices on the voice box, the spirit box. But she asked, she had kind of been humming a little bit, and she says, somebody was singing. And she said, should we sing for them? I said, yeah, go ahead and sing for them. And she said, I don't know what to sing. And she had, You Are My Sunshine was all that came to her. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. So please don't take my sunshine away. Something like that. You know the song, little kid song, old song. And that came to her mind, and she said, I could sing that. I said, sing it. If it came to your mind, sing that. And she sang it. And then I said, why don't we all sing this little child's song along with Sarah? And we all sang it again. You had a lot of people joined in and sang that. And coming out of the voice box were the words, great, thank you, beautiful. Words like that came right out of that spirit box immediately afterwards. And that was acknowledgement to the song. How many ghost hunters, which investigators, go in to a place and just want to find activity? Sometimes they're dicks about it and they try to antagonize to get a response, forgetting that the spirits of people, if they exist, were once people too. They have free will to a certain extent on the other side. They don't have to come and talk to you if they don't want to. It's like, F off. There are other times you get the exact opposite. Somebody who wants to jabber at you all night. But what was interesting was they responded to the song. Somebody sang for them. And we got all these positive responses coming out of the box. The word great that came out was almost screamed, great! It said like that. And so it's a learning lesson as well as just looking and trying to tap into the paranormal. Now, I've got a few photos I want to show you. And again, my apologies to the radio audience in that you're not going to be able to see these. I'll describe them and you can come and see them. But I've got a few things. There were questions about orbs that people have. And I find, now you know what an orb is. You get a photo and it's got a little light anomaly captured in the photo. You've seen them on films, the floating orbs, the straight line shooting orbs, things like that. Now, I've always found orbs being rather dubious in photos because many times what you're really just catching is the light from your flash in your camera is reflecting off of dust that's in the air. Could be dust that's a foot away from your camera while you're taking a picture of somebody 8 feet away from your camera, and it looks like there's a little orb by somebody's. Oh, that's my grandma. It's that orb. It's my dead grandma. And when all it is dust that the light from the flash is reflected off of. And so you get a lot of that. Moisture in the air, things like that. And so even at a time where I was very dubious about the orbs in general, I was in England back in, this photo now, this is old. This is back in 2005. I went with a couple of buddies of mine, and we went pub hopping and castle hopping, rented a car of our own, and drove all around England and into Wales and back down, and we spent a lot of time there. We went down to Portsmouth Harbor, one of the first nights we were there, and we were at Portchester Castle, which has been there for well over 1,000 years. And it's all in ruins, of course. It's right on the harbor there. And I took one picture. I took a bunch of pictures there, many pictures. I'm a photographer as well. And this is all I had available right now. But this is the wall of Portchester Castle. Now, it's a little fuzzy here because it was a low-res picture. But I want you to take a look. This is a window. The original, by the way, is like 55 megabytes large. This is a small low-res, so it's a little fuzzy. If you look in the window, that's just a broken-out window from the second floor of this castle, Portchester Castle. And right up above that, you see a little black that is the sky showing through the broken-out top of the wall. Now, in this photo, I counted 15 different orbs. And there were 2 that were very prominent in the black broken-out window. And you can see them there. There's 2 white orbs. Now, were those moisture in the air? Were they dust? We didn't know. But when I got back to the hotel room that night, I enlarged this photo. I enlarged the small orb at the top. Now let me show this next picture right here. This is the orb from which I got an image of, it says a monk image, and I've just given you the punchline here. But I didn't know what was there, so I took that orb right there, which just looks like a little small dot, and I blew it up 1,600% to take a look at it. And this is what I got. I got this right here. Now, take a look at this. The squared off area in the middle, darker gray, you can see an image of something there. Now, take a really close look at that. I did an overlay of this in Photoshop and drew out what I think I'm seeing here. But this was the orb that I saw hanging in the sky. What I did with this in Photoshop was it was in negative form. It was a white orb against a black sky. So I just inverted the image. So it's a reverse inverted image of this. And this is what I saw. Now, I happen to see in this the profile of an old guy with a bald spot on top. His lips are partially open. He's looking to the right. His eyes are either open or are partially shut. A nose with a shadow in his cheekbone, shadow under his nose, shadow under his chin, and he seems to be wearing a big cowl collar around his neck. Now, here's what I saw. Let me get to the right image here. Hold on. I know I put it in here. That's not it. Hold on. That's not it. Hang on. I've got to see where I've got it in here. It's the overlay is what I'm looking. There it is. All right. Now, on the left, you see the image that came. It was the raw image from the orb, only inverted, and that was it. And on the right, you see a line drawing I did in Photoshop over the top of that image, and you can see what I was seeing at the time. Now, those of you on radio, again, what you're seeing is, I believe, the face of an older man. He's got white hair, a little long in the back, a ringlet of hair around the top of his head, bald on top. You can see his ear, the shadows, the chin, the jawline. You can see the cheekbone shadows, the eye socket, a partially closed eye or fully closed, his mouth partially open, and a big cowl collar around his neck. And then that image actually trails off down the photo. And so this is what I saw. And folks listening, you'll have to take my word for it that I'm showing this image, and this is what I saw. This is what we're talking about here. And this particular image then said to me that there was something caught in that orb. It was an orb trying to manifest shape. And what we found out the next morning was that Porchester Castle was purportedly haunted by an old monk for about the last 900 years. And so this is the image we got. To me, that resembled a monk. It resembled somebody in a robe with a big collar, with the ringlet of hair on the top of his head. And so there you go. You can take a look at that for a moment. And that is something I captured in an orb. So while I think that not every picture of orbs is genuine, I do think I captured something in this one. As you can see on this image, here this is without the overlay. If you look down past the cowl collar and down into, there's a fading image coming from his shoulder as if it's trying to manifest more of the entity himself. So that was all from the one little orb that was in the top of the window in this photo here. Right there. Circled in red in that picture. All right. So let's move away from that. That's some of the imagery I've gotten out of many, 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 many images. That was one I wanted to show you. And then there was another one, and we've only got a few minutes left, and I'm going to tell you about this. Rainey and I and some friends of ours were doing a little paranormal investigation at an old antique store in a small river town in Minnesota called Winona. And it's down the, I don't know if it's the Mississippi or the St. Croix River. And so it was an old river town in the 1800s. And the building we're in was 9 times it had been owned, and many times as a bar, as a brothel further back, and a bar. So they get a lot of activity in this antique store. So we were down in the basement, and our photographer was taking a picture. And Rainey and I were standing there just prepping some equipment, and a couple of our friends were with us, and we hear the photographer say, "What the hell is that?" And I look over, and he's looking at his camera screen. And he said, "Guys, hold still. I'm going to take another picture." And he takes another one, and he goes, "There it is again." And then he took a couple more, and he says it's in every picture. Now, here's what he saw. He showed us this picture. This is we call it the Winona shadow. Now, I've got 2 pictures side by side here. It's the same image, but I lightened it so you could see that I'm standing right back in there. Now, if you look at the image on the left, this is what he saw in his camera. Now, he's standing about 12 feet away from us. When he took this picture, you see Nikki in the foreground, and you see Luke and Danny and me are in this picture, not Rainey. And he shot this picture and got this dark shadow image. And what it looked like to us was a head on the top, where you're seeing going down the left side to a sloped shoulder and down to arm and down to the leg. And it's completely black, and it's very amorphous. Other than being able to see, it's the rough shape of something. And then in the picture on the right in this image, I lightened that all up so you could see it was actually transparent. Now, a shadow being cast like this, if you look in the picture on the left, look at the kind of orangey red pole that's going up, the support beam down in the basement there. Just to the right of that, you see a dark shadow that it's casting. And if you notice, the shadows are very cut and clean. Look at the ductwork up on the ceiling in the upper left. You see the shadow running along that. It's very cut and clean. Now, this particular shadow is very blurred on the edges and rounded. Now, when he took this picture, the photographer said, "There is nothing in between you and me. It's not his finger. He's a professional photographer. It's not a strap. It's nothing like that. We checked all of this out, and you can see it's transparent." Now, that's the first shot he took. This is the next shot he took, where you can see on the left, I'm looking away, and you can see the shadow is moving off to the right. And then the picture right next to it is Rainey. Now, by the way, she is, I think, 6 to 7 months pregnant with Flynn in this picture. So, yeah, this is a good 10 plus years ago. And so she's very pregnant in this picture. But you can see off to the right that black shadow moving off the edge of the camera again. And there was actually one more picture, and I don't know if we put it in here or not. No, I think that's it. So those are some pictures that we got. And I thought you'd be very interested in seeing that. And I've now run way over time, so I can't talk about it very much. Those are some shadow figures from some of our investigations. And I got to cut it off abruptly there. We're at the end of the show. Thanks for being here, folks. 23 hours from now, we'll be right back. Sit tight.